Hey, it's Matt from Black Coal Woodworking. Welcome back. Today I'm making a set of snack bowls out of maple. They're a lot of fun to make, especially when you get shavings like this. Kind of rewarding actually. The shavings, while they're a byproduct, I use them in my garden bed, so there's a nicer way to use them up instead of just throwing them out. But anyway, back to the bowls. Let's see the process of how I made these. I'm using a worm screw to attach that block of wood, which I did cut with the chainsaw. I'm knocking off the corners first. I'm using a 1/2 inch spindle gouge here, and it works pretty good. I like that. It's probably my preferred tool of choice to get at the outside. You will notice that I'm not getting a whole lot of really long shavings yet, and that's just because when you knock off the corners, there's a lot of air that I'm turning. You've got to be really careful to go a little slower and not get your fingers in the way. You should never put your fingers past the tool rest anyway, because you would have checked that you've cleared the wood by spinning it, and if you can spin the wood, not hit the tool rest, you won't hit your fingers either. So at the bottom, I'm getting to the round part, which actually sounds kind of nice. I'll turn up the volume here in a bit. You can just hear how it cuts. It's more like a wispy cutting sound. When you get to that, that's fun. Still have some corners to knock out on the top part of the piece though. Gotta true up the bottom now. It's not exactly flat there, so just using the left wing of my 1/2 inch spindle gouge allows me to flatten that out quite nicely. Again, I can tell I'm flatter when I get nice long shavings. The next step is to round off that corner. Sound is super important when you're turning wood. That sound you just heard is a very happy little wispy sound that I was talking about. Produces shavings like that. I did find that somehow I managed to chip the bottom of the bowl, so I've got to deal with that and cut that bad part away. Wasn't hard. Thankfully it didn't go that deep. I'm not sure why it chipped, but there must have been a crack, so it's good that I find it now and not later. Thanks to that little crack, I'm just refining the shape here still. And I'm using a push cut because there's a little bit of a bulge in one spot that I didn't quite get right. That creates a very fine shaving and a great cut. Now I've got to mark out the bottom because I want to use a recess to grab this thing when I go to hollow it out. Using my parting tool, I set that recess depth, and then I'll switch back to my 1/2 inch spindle gouge to kind of flatten the foot and remove the bottom of the middle there. And then somehow I managed to create what looks exactly like a zit. So that's got to go, and I'll use my flat scraper to do that. Oof, gone. I've switched to using a flat scraper on the bottom because my intention is to start branding the bottom of the bowls, and I think I'll get better contact with the branding iron if I've got a nice flat surface. Using my 1/2 inch spindle gouge, I clean up the dovetail for the jaws of my chuck. That way I can get a nice firm grip. I really don't want that piece of wood coming off when I'm turning. Still had a bit of a bulge I needed to refine, so I'm going to use a push cut to do that. And if you get vibration, you sort of push through it, but really gently. And you end up getting these really fine, we'll call them angel hair wood noodles. And those are really nice, but you know you've got a clean cut when you see that. So after that, I switched over to my round nose scraper actually, with a fresh burr on it and at a bit of an angle. It allows me to clean up the outside quite well. I did do some sanding, but I usually skip that part because it's about as much entertainment as watching grass grow. This is walnut oil that I'm putting on the outside of the bowl, and I've kind of changed my finishing process a bit. Walnut oil is the first step, and once I've put the oil on, I just kind of run the lathe at a higher speed to kind of burnish the oil into the wood a little bit deeper. And so once the burnishing is done, then I switch over to step 2. And step 2 is shellac. So I just grabbed a dollar store microfiber cloth and I just put tiny thin layers of shellac onto the bowl. I'm trying to build up a bit of a finish. It's like a French polish, really. I normally follow it up with a thin coat of wax, but forgot to film that. Looks kind of shiny. I like it. On the inside, I'm first flattening off the surface so that it's a little bit easier to dive into the bowl. If you don't do that, I find that it gets a little rocky. And if it gets rocky, you risk losing the bowl because it might fly off. So this part's just super satisfying. Again, the sound, that's the nice part. It's a key to knowing you're getting a good cut. To hollow out the bowl, I'm pointing the bevel directly in. I start gently and then kind of open the tool up a little bit as I get inside. Then you start to get that sound of that wispy cut. And once I hear that sound, then I know I've got a good cut going. If it gets bumpy and rocky, that's when you start risk knocking this thing off the lathe. So it's worth taking your time, not being too quick about it. The wood will cut away nicely like that. To get rid of that last lump in the center, I do flip the gouge around. It tends to work quite well. I'm still going directly into side grain, so it's easier on the tool than it is to kind of go the other direction on the bottom of a bowl. Like this direction that I'm about to go now. It does work. It works well, but it's not as easy as going in the other direction. Although there are some trade-offs. You do get a flatter surface that way. You can kind of blend the sides into the bottom. But when you get to that middle lump, you generally find that turning the tool around is better because I end up kind of overshooting sometimes. And if you overshoot too far, going from left to right, and you hit the other side of the bowl, it's spinning and it's going to grab your tool and whip it around on you. So you just have to be really careful when you get close to that center, as I have found out in the past, and probably in the future too. To establish the final wall thickness, I go really slow at first. And here again, I'm really trying to get the left wing of that tool to ride along the wall. It's kind of like lining the bevel up again, but you get a much cleaner cut. And then I'll use a nice scraping cut to kind of clean up the bottom a little bit. I am using a 40-40 grind, which I do find works quite well for a lot of situations. I flipped over to a round nose scraper here to do the last kind of final passes to clean up the inside of the bowl as much as I can, because everybody loves sanding. I'm trying to touch the wood as little as possible with this scraper and let the burr do the work. That's how you get the cleanest cut. I guess you could angle it as well, and then if you give it a bit of an angle, it's even better. The finish on the inside is much the same as the outside. Walnut oil, shellac, and then beeswax. Ah, now I've got a nice shiny inside too. Now I've got some shavings to deal with. So, this is really the process. Get these shavings in there, covering the dirt. Should mean I have to water less. These are raspberries. Don't want to drain well and all that, so they're in a raised bed. But if this means I have less work in the garden, it's worth a shot. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and shoot me a comment. If I've earned it, consider subscribing. See you guys next time.